Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Blowback Roundtable. I'm Billy Bob. I am here on the left coast. We've got 9 a.m. I've got Ben Toth in Hungary. It is 6 p.m., correct?
Correct.
8 p.m. in Moscow, right, Ian?
Yeah. Oh, how's the weather, everybody? Because we got like 15 centimeters of snow. We're way below Celsius zero here. I hear that Billy Bobby's having a rainy time.
Yeah, I've got bad weather. It's overcast. It's the rain brings a little bit of heat. It's like in the mid 50s is the high. Nothing really cold. What about in Moscow, Ian?
It's not bad this week. It was terrible last week. It was like below 20 a few points. It's not terrible today. I walked around a lot today, and it was in central Moscow, and it wasn't bad today. Still, of course, it's going to be sub-zero or close to sub-zero for several months, I'm sure, but it's not bad. And you acclimate to Moscow weather after a while, which I have.
Layers.
Yes. Which is so funny because, I remember like right at the beginning of the special military operation in Ukraine, there was all of these stories in Western media. Oh, Russians did not prepare for Ukrainian winter. It's like, well, Ukrainian winter is either the same or actually better than.
It's a bit milder
depending where
than
you
Russian.
are. And yes, it's southern Russian weather.
And historically, Russians don't know winter. They just don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been an advantage on the battlefield. The Germans definitely weren't prepared for a Ukrainian or Russian winter during World War II. Our show is entitled "Everything is in Motion," so that's in reference to just the tumultuous year that 2024 is going to be. I mean, everywhere you look, including and especially the U.S. presidential election. Is just everything's just there's it's all a big moving part. Everything's a moving part. But let's talk about the domestic political election. Last night was the kickoff of the primary. So the Democratic Party is not going to be holding any primaries, which is weird. So this old person, Joe Biden, is going to be the Democratic nominee, and they're not going to allow anybody else to run against him. So I find that interesting. I'm thinking maybe they have a plan to deal with him, and they don't want to jeopardize that plan with democracy, right? They don't want to allow democracy because that might jeopardize the plan. The plan, I don't believe, is going to include Joe Biden being the president for another 4 years. Like, to me, that is unimaginable. Now, in full disclosure, I said the same thing 4 years ago, and I was wrong. Like I said, Joe Biden would not last 4 years 4 years ago, and I was wrong. But I've got to be right this time. There's no way I'm not right this time. But last night with the Iowa caucuses, Trump, did very, very well. I think he did better than he did last election cycle. 51% of all the Republican primary votes he won. We do have a graph, and so does anybody have, did I steal everybody's thunder? Does anybody have any commentary on, let's put that back up, on how well Trump did with 51%, DeSantis 21, and Nikki Haley 19. She won one county. Any thoughts about that? Like, how was Putin able to pull that off? Like what kind of a ground game does Putin have in Iowa that allowed him to get Trump this fantastic victory?
Don't you see it's all red? That's the red Ruski commies. That's what it is.
Well, what he did, and I read a lot of news articles about this after the Trump victory in 2016. What Russia does is they spend 5,000 rubles on not even $5,000, 5,000 rubles. It's a single banknote on Facebook ads. And that is enough to swing the American election. I'm actually surprised Iraq or Ethiopia hasn't stolen an American election yet.
Yemen could even afford
Yemen could.
They could even afford to swing the U.S. election by investing, 5,000 of whatever their currency is. We make fun. We make fun of the nonsense that the media tries to shove down our throats. But it was really preposterous to assert, that Russia was responsible for Trump's victory last election cycle. And I don't see as much of that going on, but I want to bring it up just to highlight the ridiculousn's of it all.
I saw someone break it. Hello, Todd. Someone break it down to like what did for each of these nominees, what did a vote cost? And apparently, Nikki Haley invested the most money, the PR, all the campaigning and everything, and the most expensive for just a few votes. That one little Iowa city is basically what she managed to win, and Trump had like 1/5 of that when it comes to budget, and it's amazing to me. But I'm again far away on the outside. Who knows how it's going to go? And you guys can tell me about the technology, which we don't want to get into. It's going to be fair and square. But I was just going to say, back in Hungary, because if there were irregularities, they were caught immediately, and that's because we have paper ballots. They put it out on a sorting desk, and everybody's in there with cameras. Everybody's allowed in. It's public, and if they see someone doing the naughty, they get caught. It would be a very simple system. Unfortunately, maybe light years away from the US, but you guys will know that.
Well, Hungary is a dictatorship. That's what the TV tells me.
So is Russia. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's 3 contenders to Vladimir Putin. The communists already put forward someone, so that is already completely open. And he's 10 years younger than Biden, and looks 20 years younger.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, Billy Bob, I will actually take the opposite end of that bet. I think Biden is the man. And, and I want to, just as a personal analogy, imagine that, it could be your current job or a job you had in the past. Just imagine at your place of work, you have a boss who is an idiot. He's just a complete idiot, and he's just brain dead. And you can just, any project you want to do, or you need funding, or you need approval for a business trip to Hawaii, just whatever you want, you can just put it on his desk and be like, hey, dude, just sign it. And he'll just look, because he doesn't even know where he is. He just signs it. Just imagine you had that situation. It'd be like being in heaven. So I think for all those little drones at the White House, for the secretary, for whoever it is, the Defense Department, the State Department, everybody, it's like, and I made this comparison a couple of weeks ago. I was in a different conversation, but I think it's very much like the Holy Roman Empire. It's this where the princes voted on who the next emperor was going to be. But they didn't want a strong emperor, because a strong emperor is an actual leader, makes you pay taxes and actually has authority. The princes don't want that. They want someone who's a vegetable, and they can do what they want. I think we have a similar situation with Biden, because it's just, I see all these people from Russia and other countries speculating on who is in charge in the USA. So I think it's just what it is. All of these different organizations and factions just love not having a president who's cognizant, who actually does what wants.
No, that's a sound analysis, and I definitely agree. And I wouldn't push back. I would say that at some point they're going to need leadership. And I would also say that, anybody that's going to replace him, such as DeSantis or Nikki Haley, are also going to be yes people, right? I wouldn't say that they would be strong leaders. So I think that's why they feared Trump. I think your analysis is correct insofar as that's why they wouldn't want Trump, but that they're going to work. They would prefer somebody who is at least, friendly, good in front of the camera, and that can be a better rubber stamp of whatever they want to do than, the weekend at Biden's kind of thing, where they have to, prop him up and wave his arms. You know what I'm saying?
Let me tell you what I found particularly fantastic about the US, the beginning. It's been 2 weeks into this year. Imagine this is going to go on till November, which, anyway, the economic news when it comes to elections, I thought that was amazing, because in Europe, there's economic pain. And I don't know if there's massive farmers' protests going across Germany. There's massive protests again in France. Same is going on with Romania. People feel the pain, and they say, out with you fuckheads, really, really massively. In America, what they are trying to convince people is the economy is fine. The numbers look great to us here on the paper. And there's been one after the other for the last week of these. Why are Americans so gloomy about their great economy? glummer than the numbers suggest. That's the Economist headline, right? Americans are in no mood for good news because the good news on the economy is just not cutting through. That was the Times, not the New York Times, but the London Times. Washington Post, the economy is improving under Biden, but many voters just don't give him credit. I mean, these complaining headlines, everything is looking fine for us here in the graphs and on the paper, while you're in like a ticking time bomb of 34 trillion debt. But everything is fine. And apparently prices, gas prices, food prices, everything's fine. That to me looks insane. It looks like these people up there. I mean, I don't know if it was breached, but this was based on the Middle East policy. That the White House was surrounded. I mean, most of the staff were evacuated like last week sometime because the rioters were basically there at the doorstep. There were snipers on the roof. And these people, they say, everything's fine. What's wrong with you people? And therefore, Putin. By the way, Scholz did the same. All these far-right tractor drivers, Putin is the one who's egging them on to go against their government.
Yeah, I wonder to what extent those headlines are like a signal to their class compatriots to really, to change their messaging and hit home, propagandize the economy is good, the economy is good. That's kind of what it's a signal to their other their other propagandists that, hey, this is an area we need to identify and really push home and really propagandize everyone into believing the economy is good. That way we can, make sure we can maybe get Biden reelected or whatever happens with that, but keep Trump out because, an economy that's bad under Biden is going to be good for Trump's electoral prospects, which ultimately might end up coming down to a Supreme Court decision. But so did we finish up with the Iowa caucuses? I mean, it was a historic landslide victory for Trump. Really looks good going forward. We know that there's some court cases to get him off the ballot in certain states. And ultimately, that is probably going to go to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court will not agree to hear those cases, my understanding is he will be on the ballot in those states. Like, that's the default. If the Supreme Court refuses to hear this case in a timely manner, Trump is not removed from the ballot of any state. That's my understanding. So really, for Trump to be removed, it's going to have to be a Supreme Court decision. And I'm not sure if the Supreme Court's going to want to hear that and put themselves in that situation. On the other hand, maybe they will.
I have a closing thought.
Yes.
I think I look at that graph of the debt. I look at the 1 trillion in interest, not even just funding, just in paying the interest payments of the debt we currently have. I look at that and I look at my pension that I'm getting because I get a military pension. I'm like, ooh, that's not good. That said, I think the economy will do okay for this year. The reason I say that is because it's an election year. The economy has to do okay. Last year, what did Biden do? He emptied our strategic reserve of oil, basically emptied it. Is at record lows. And what's he doing?
100-year low. Yeah.
Yes. And what's he doing this year? He's bringing back Russian oil. So I think the plan is he's just going to ignore the sanctions because the sanctions are targeted at Europe just as much as they're targeted at Russia.
That's for us. That's for us, not for you guys.
So I think Russians are, because Russians could, if they wanted to, they could say, you know what, screw the USA. We're not going to sell. They could do that. They could just say, we're not going to give you anything. But I think the Russians are going to play along with the game because in their minds, the USA will eventually, because this is my theory, is the Russians think the USA is eventually going to have a different group of people as the government, and there will eventually come around to Russian side. But the Europeans are just on this hate Russia bandwagon. They can't be bought. They can't be reasoned with. So they are going to play along with the American game of dividing up Russia. There's going to be sensible countries like Hungary, and then there's going to be maybe France. There's going to be countries like Germany that just don't play along and sink as a result. So that's my grand theory.
Do you know what also links us? Again, not Hungary, because I think Viktor Orban on his social media congratulated Trump immediately, his old friend, on the Iowa caucus victory. But like Christine Lagarde, who's like our central banker, the ECB money chick, also as old as time. Like you guys have that little, it's a smaller bird, but whoever that is, the Fed woman.
I can't remember her name, but yes.
Janet Yellen.
Yeah.
Janet Yellen. Yeah, the European Janet Yellen said Trump is a national security threat. The re-election of Trump is a national security threat for Europe. The British are preparing like a Trump 2.0 dossier in case he gets close to re-election. These people are absolutely terrified of a second Trump run. And by the way, that's my reason as a non-voting, non-American guy for absolutely supporting this guy. NATO absolutely hates him. The European blob absolutely hates him. And Ukraine is terrified because he might pull out of NATO because there was this conversation. I don't remember which European, like a previous European leader, maybe a former chancellor, someone wrote a column about. Like 2 years ago, I was there for the conversation, and Trump said, if you get into a war or trouble, we're just not going to help you. And they ran this now, January 2024. That's how terrified they are of a second Trump presidency. And that's something I really enjoy.
You know what? There's two, and before I forget, but I want to say there's two big problems. You're right. Everybody in and outside the USA in the establishment fears him. And I want to say in my mind, there are two reasons it boils down why they hate Trump so much. The first reason is because, I'm not a fan of Trump. I don't think he's he's not like some sort of genius. But at the same time, if you walk into Trump's office, you walk into the Oval Office and you want something, you have to convince him. You're like, hey, I want to do this economic plan, or I want to shoot a missile at this Iranian general in Syria. You have to convince him. Okay, well, why should I approve this? He argues with you. You have to
go around him.
And they hate him for that because they can't just do with Biden. They can do whatever they want. But with Trump, you have to convince him. And then the second problem is related to the first problem. So let's say he's like, okay, you know what? I don't like this Iranian general. Let's take him out. Then the next day he's tweeting, hey, I just took out. He takes the credit for it. I took out this Iranian general personally.
Yeah, or we're there for the oil. I mean, that quiet part out thing is amazing that he does.
So I think those are the two, because for these bureaucrats, just imagine, look at, like, go to wherever you work and just look at the pettiest small-minded person there, and that's what everybody. I'm not exaggerating. This is because I've spent enough time in the military to know this. This is what every bureaucrat in the civil and military apparatus in the USA is like. They're just very petty people. They hate someone like Trump who does that.
Yeah.
So the overall strategy of the Western Transatlantic Alliance, right? The Western Transatlantic Alliance, the ruling establishment, also known as the ruling establishment, is to work together as a united front, Europe, Australia, South Korea, Japan, the United States, to subvert, Russia and China, and make sure that they don't, become, threats to, Western global hegemony. So what Trump says is, fuck the Transatlantic Alliance. We're putting America first. I don't give a fuck about Europe. Europe is a competitor. Russia's a competitor. China's a competitor. Everybody's a competitor, and I'm putting America first. So this, resonates with the electorate, with your average American voter. So Trump has these instincts. He knows what to say, and he's like, fuck Europe. And most U.S. people are like, yeah, fuck Europe. But that makes him a problem for the imperialists, for the Western establishment, because their whole strategy is predicated on this transatlantic alliance. And Trump's been trashing the idea of this transatlantic alliance since, before he even ran for president in 2016. But I think that
by a huge margin, not you guys, but America pays the most into NATO. America paid the most into Ukraine.
No, and that was something Trump would always hit home about. Like, why are we giving you this for free? What are you doing for us? And so, of course, Trump's an idiot, right? Like, Trump is a literal idiot. He doesn't know what the fuck all that's about. He knows what to say to get elected, but it would be a disaster for the empire. And they would have to manage him, and they would have to, go work behind his back, and all the things they did the first 4 years, they'd have to do that again. And they don't want any part of that. So, and that's why he's so hated. And like you said, Ian, it's the same thing you said earlier. It's because he would be like an actual emperor that they would have to get approval from, and they don't want to deal with that. They want a rubber stamp person. But we've got a lot of commentary. Let's see. So I want to say,
wondering where you want to go, but a comments maybe first, because I wanted to add a little bit onto that.
So yeah, we're talking about, where all the big investors are giving their money. They were all giving their money to DeSantis, and now they kind of dumped DeSantis and were given to Nikki Haley. But now Nikki Haley didn't do as good as DeSantis in the Iowa caucuses, despite spending more money than anybody. And so we'll see what the donors do. But they definitely want Trump out, but they can't throw enough money to get Trump out, it seems like.
I'm amazed that they actually thought that Nikki Haley would happen. The person, everything I've seen from her, like, this is not viable. I can't imagine anyone would vote for her, but they really thought, we got this.
I want to say that, it's going to be interesting to see this Republican and Democrat lineup, because Israel, the Gaza genocide, is going to hurt the Democrats more than Republicans. So Republicans and Christian evangelicals in the USA are just diehard Israel I would personally give my life for Israel. That's the mentality, They would take it, like if someone shot at an Israeli soldier, these guys would jump in front of the bullet almost, but Democrats are more, they're less white. They're just more liberal, of course. And they're just like, why is Biden supporting a literal genocide? So that is going to hurt Democrats more than Republicans. And meanwhile, Trump is an idiot, but he's savvy. He's a savvy businessman. So he's going to see that. And he says whatever is popular. I've noticed that about him. Everybody's noticed about them. He's like, I could, like how his statement, I could end every war in a day. And he's almost not exaggerating, because he could. Because USA is funding most of them. So
you're right on a couple of things that I want to kind of ride on. One is he's a businessman. He says, what are the benefits? What are the he doesn't do grand chessboard stuff. He looks at the whole world and understands all the things. In this decision, what's in it for me? What's in it for that sort of stuff. But what I wanted to get onto was, if he actually pulled out of this transatlantic blob, there was this high dust. He's a preeminent, one of the last basically French academics, like true thinkers, Emmanuel Todd, and he ran this big article, and it was about if the US were actually going to recede, to get out of Europe, it would be the best thing to ever happen here. We said that we would finally, actually maybe look for peace, because we wouldn't be in the position like the Baltics midgets are. They're like threatening everybody with US force. Is what Europe is in this fever of, and they're really, really scared because Project Ukraine has collapsed, obviously. And if America couldn't save them, who's going to save us? And it would be the best thing to happen here in Europe. And by the way, on a couple of metrics on Biden, 15% this is approval, which is apparently the lowest in, 33%. Lowest in 15 years, 33%. American satisfaction with democracy is a record low, Gallup. And what you said about the Middle East came out. The New York Post, main cover headline was, the Red Sea bungling will cost Biden 2024. That was their big headline. So there's no understating that was a big blunder that he didn't need.
Yes. So you want to segue that into our next topic here, or
Paulie is agreeing that they hate Trump with a passion. Shaniqua agrees that our ruling elites, all the apparatchiks in the State Department and defense are petty. So so that the Israel comment about it's going to be more damaging to Democrats and Republicans is absolutely right. A lot of Democratic voters understand that our fealty to Israel is not, is not morally justifiable, and it's not something that's in the best interest of our country. So there's a lot of pro-Palestinian feelings on the Democratic side, which isn't there on the Republican side. Now, Trump, of course, one thing that we could count on was his fealty to Israel throughout his 4 years. So his His son-in-law, of course, is the son of a big real estate mogul who was responsible for developing a whole bunch of the illegal settlements in the West Bank. So I mean, he's just been all in with Israel. But
Every candidate is.
no, it's true. Every candidate is, but Trump did some unprecedented things. He moved the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, or not the capital, but he moved the embassy, which was unprecedented. And he was trying to, with the Abraham Accords, normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So he was really pushing a pro-Israel agenda, and he also did, attack Soleimani. But I still think that he more than anyone else would have the capacity to hold Israel accountable too. And for that reason, that's another reason why even the Zionists don't want him in charge, because he could, put the United States first in a way that Biden will never do. But why is that? Like, why is Biden taking all this damage to his own political party and to himself instead of just ending a genocide? Like, what's going on with that? Anybody have any?
I wish I saw into the Oval Office, because all the messaging coming from the White House and his team is, we're really unsatisfied. We don't like that they want to move the Palestinians out of the way. We have a plan. We're quietly negotiating. It's basically Israel's gone rogue. They don't follow Blinken's little guidelines anymore. Like, this is what you can do. We'll send you some more weapons, but you shouldn't do that. And Netanyahu doesn't give a fuck. He's basically attacking who he wants.
Let me push back against that, Ben. Like, so that's a narrative, right? That's a narrative that the United States is working quietly behind the scenes, and Biden said that. He's like, I'm behind. Why is he not speaking it out loud? Why is he not being transparent? Why is he not saying it out loud? Why is he not threatening to not give military aid? So because I mean, that's my question.
Well, have you both seen the TV show Breaking Bad, of the high school teacher who makes meth?
Walter White,
Yes. So there is Gus, the man who owns who launders money through a chicken restaurant.
Oh, yes. Los Pollos Hermanos, I remember.
Yes.
Great character.
So I really liked him. There's one particular scene in that show I really liked. So basically Gus, this... he's distinguished. He's a very famous. I don't remember the actor's name, but he's that black guy with the glasses, wears a business suit, very distinguished looking. And basically, what he does is the main character gets into this feud with this gangster, and they're like about to kill each other. And basically, so Gus brings them both into his office, and he just straight up tells them, I don't care who started it, I don't care what your problem is, but you will both make peace. And basically, there will be consequences if you don't make peace. So I really like that scene, because that's essentially what someone who's running an organization and cares about money, that's what he does. When he sees something going on that he doesn't like is hurting him, it's hurting his business, he brings him in and just says, hey, stop fighting each other. And so that's what Biden has not done with Israel. I mean, He's not brought them in and just said, hey, you're hurting me. You're hurting my election campaign. You're hurting the USA. I don't care who started it with the Palestine issue. Just figure it out. You have 3 weeks or a month, and he hasn't done that. He's just let them walk all over him. They boast about how they control the USA, and it's not what a leader does. It's amazing to watch.
True. Yeah, that's why I'm open to Todd's alternative explanation. Like, maybe they just they're 100% aboard with this, but how could they take this reputational damage? I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the ICJ proceedings, South Africa bringing a legal case. The first day I watched pretty much all 3 hours. It was amazing. Just pure point by point. This is what your leaders said. This is what other people, what your soldiers on the ground said. It's a shut case, right? And if they win the second, that was not broadcast anywhere in Europe, by the way, not on the news, not live anywhere. The next day it was live when Israel presented their defense. It was all emotional. It was all Holocaust. Look at how these barbarians attacked us. We are the ones who are, self-defense. This is bullshit. I'm not a legal thinker, but I've seen many people say that's no defense. That even address anything. So if they win this, Europe is going to suffer a huge reputational damage. America, exactly the same. I mean, people can argue maybe they can get to the judges. There's all sorts of behind the scenes ways to maybe stop this from happening. But if this thing goes ahead, and by the way, now they've I don't know if subpoena is the right word, but they are preparing lawsuits against the US and the UK, which is amazing. So South Africa has become like a champion for humanity, I think, this year. So I don't understand either Todd's version, like, Biden is completely aboard with this, or Biden is incompetent in dealing with this enormous damage. I don't know. I wish I knew.
I don't think, my opinion, for what it's worth, I mean, I wouldn't say it's worth a lot, but I would say they're not they just don't have a choice. Just these Israel lobby is just in charge, and they have to take it. They have to shut up and take it. It's the tail wagging the dog. They would I'm sure the Biden administration would love the Gaza problem to just go away, but they're just along for the ride. They're not in the driver's seats.
Nope. And if the Gaza thing could be solved in 2 weeks, if they just bombed it to hell, it would be. But they're not solving it. They're getting their asses kicked from most of the reports, and that's
the political fallout for Biden would be worse if he threatened them openly, right? If he threatened to withhold this military aid, that's going to be politically worse for Biden with the people that matter, right? With the billionaires, with the donors. And so, he doesn't have any good options, right? Like, the empire is in decline. You have to choose, between two bad options, and it's least bad to pretend that you oppose and you want to give lip service to opposing what Israel is doing, while on the other hand, you are forced into totally supporting it by enabling it and facilitating it with plane loads every few minutes of munitions and bombs and cash to enable the continuing genocide in Gaza. So that's Biden is doing that while he's giving lip service to opposing it, but it's an absolute contradiction. Like, it's a transparent, it's bullshit. So it's all about propaganda and pretending that you oppose something, while it's plain as day that you are supporting it, and in fact you are the one enabling it. And that's why, if the ICJ ruling goes against Israel, well, good thing Biden's going to be pushing up daisies soon, because he'd definitely be on in the dock, so to speak, along with the UK and others. But so the West really controls the ICJ, right? And I mean, it's been a tool of the West. So I mean, I'm curious how that'll play out, because it seems an open and shut case of genocide. But at the same time, if they acknowledge that, if they rule in that way and demand for a ceasefire while they do further investigation, well, that's going to increase the liability for the Western powers. And so, are they going to allow their tool to do that? I'm not sure, but everything is in motion. That's why we called our today's show "Everything is in Motion." What about Yemen? So, I mean, I'm struck by the fact that Yemen is one of the poorest, countries in the Middle East, and they've got the least to lose, right? And so I've noticed that throughout the last 100 years of history, it's those countries with the least to lose that always do the greatest things. So I'm thinking of Russia in 1917. I'm thinking of, Cuba. I'm thinking of China in 1949. Like, these countries with the least to lose, provide the biggest resistance against imperialism. And I think it's great. And, it's like checkmate. Like, Yemen has really demonstrated the incompetence and the ineptitude of the Western military power. But I don't know if we want to even start talking about Yemen yet. But
if you want to go there, yeah, I mean, Gaza was already a quagmire, doing a whole lot of damage to the Western image. We are the human rights defenders, the people who democracy and all that, rainbows. That's us. And it turns out it's just because the two things that I wanted to say about that is, in the previous conflicts, they didn't have to be so defensive, saying we don't actually support all of this, because one is media, the people with smartphones in there showing this slaughter. And the second is there's no controlling the Israeli officers saying exactly what they mean. And that's amazing that they actually do that, saying we're just gonna we want to live here, we want to slaughter everything. There should be no Palestinians. This comes out of them 24/7. But if you go down, that was already a problem, and then there was resistance, including Palestine is PIJ, Islamic Jihad. There's in the north Lebanon's Hezbollah. Iraq and Syria, the U.S. bases being hit there without the U.S. responding, which is amazing. They just quietly, well, no one died, nothing there. And then Yemen, the Houthis, as they call them, it's Ansar Allah or the Yemeni armed forces. It's downplaying their role. They decided to blockade the whole fucking Red Sea. And afterwards, what did the impotent U.S. empire do? The hammer that thinks everything's a nail. Apparently, Lloyd Austin III, who we haven't seen for 2 weeks, did it from his hospital bed, ordered this joint bombing of Yemeni targets, right? In the south, in Sana'a, in that sort of area. And immediately, like a day after, the news was, well, we didn't actually damage Ansar Allah's ability to strike us at all. Maybe 20% of the targets were hit. And we're really mad at the UK for leaking this information hours ahead of stuff. I mean, the people of Yemen have been at war with Saudi Arabia for 10 years. It's obvious they put everything in the mountains. Very difficult region, by the way. It's not a flatland. In the mountains, in the caves, hidden basically. And after this whole thing that was supposed to be, we want to decrease tensions. We don't want anyone to escalate. So we're going to bomb Yemen, right? On that day, by the way, Blinken got the cover of Time magazine, America's leadership. And his statement was, we don't want any escalation. Okay, 100 missiles sent onto Yemeni targets. Like the next day, they were in Sana'a, in Aden, like, we are ready. They put some videos out. I have one, but it's very long. I don't want to. It's amazing, like, never, never, yalla, yalla, America, never, never, America. It just united them. And they hit 2 more ships. They tried to hit an American warship, but apparently some jet shot down the missile, and they hit another, what do you call it? A bulk transit transport ship, one of those container ships, which got some fire.
I saw the images of that one burning. So
yep, I think if that was a video, that's probably from a couple of years ago. It turned out to be not real, but there was a fire. It turned around. It didn't sink. Turned around, went the hell away, and like the big oil tankers and the big companies, they're just suspending it, which is horrible for Europe. For instance, Qatari gas can't get here when we really need gas. They said, okay, we're not going to go through this. So what did you achieve with this bloody missile strike? The opposite. It didn't open up maritime traffic except for China and Russia. It blocked it even further, and they can still hit whoever they want. So amazing heroes, the Yemenis. Is what I want to say.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, for the last 2 years with the Ukraine thing going on, everybody's been saying, sooner or later there's going to be some other conflict that is causing a problem, is going to distract. And this might be it. I mean, it's blown up farther than I would have expected. And I think the way you described Yemen is accurate, because when you have this martyrdom complex, when you have people who've just been bombed for 10 years, because like even Lebanon with Hezbollah, they recovered from that war, and there's hesitation about getting into another war that will destroy their communities. But with Yemen, which has just been war torn for 10 years, there's less to lose, and they have a different mentality.
But there's still 30 million of these lads with little, rocket launchers and AKs. And the immediate response was not from al-Houthi, the political leader, but from the military leader, the skinny guy. You've probably seen him on different things. Like, we are proud that we are finally getting bombed. We were ashamed that the people of Palestine we want to save, are the only ones getting bombed. Imagine any other country in the world saying that. That was just amazing. Just the statement is amazing.
Well, the other Arab, let's be honest, most of the other Arab states are in the pocket of Israel.
Unfortunately, yeah. Except for Iran, which we can talk about because that's the latest news, which was last night, that they struck Erbil, which is in sort of...
Erbil, yes.
Erbil, yes. Do you know many details of that? Because I can give you the basics, but I haven't followed it closely.
Well, I've been to Erbil base. I went there.
Take it over, Ian.
Go. Yes, it was... it's a base there, so I mean, it's just you're having this problem with asymmetric warfare because, I mean, what does it take to shoot a rocket at an American base or to send a boat full of guys to take over a tanker ship? It takes very little. I mean, anybody can do that.
That's the other thing that happens.
But how do you stop that? You can shoot all the missiles you like at Yemen, or you can bomb all the ammo depots you like in Syria. It's not going to reduce these. It's just, I mean, and people have been saying this for 30 years. The effect of air power is wildly overstated. If you want to stop someone from doing these low scale attacks, anything short of just occupying the whole country is not going to do it.
There's no military option really other than full occupation of Yemen, and we couldn't do that in Iraq. I'm pretty sure Yemen is even bigger territorial wise than Iraq. So no, I mean, it's out of the question that any president could talk the U.S. public into supporting an occupation of Yemen. So they're really stuck. Like, they're really in a conundrum where there's no good options. There's no military option. And like was pointed out earlier, these missile strikes, it didn't do anything. It probably just, increased the resolve of Yemen, and it demonstrated more of the truth that there's no military option, and the West is impotent. Their military is impotent to do anything in this particular situation.
The missile strikes on Yemen, I agree with you. That was an impotent, basically lashing out. But the missile strikes on Erbil, which is the Turkestan region of Iraq, occupied Iraq. I mean, they're sending 1,500 troops to Iraq and Syria. Both places want them out. So that's not an invitation. That's basically another increasing occupation. But what this was apparently from the IRGC, a revenge strike for the hundreds of people martyred and another 100 hurt at the ceremony, which was the 3-year anniversary of remembering Soleimani, right? This was a revenge hit for that. And they said, we didn't hit the American consulate there. We hit basically a Mossad center, and Turkestan is basically, well, the Kurdish terrorist bases around that, and also some other targets in Syria. And immediately the US said, well, none of our people got hurt. The embassy is not hurt. We condemn this for being imprecise and reckless, but basically we're fine. No need to escalate. Nothing. It was very targeted. It was a huge warning, but but I don't think it was meritless. I mean, there was this one business guy who I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Yeah. A huge businessman. Maybe you guys know his background better, but he was in charge of siphoning Iraqi oil, Israel. He also had like this private army. A lot of American mercs signed up for that. A very important person, and his home was hit, not by accident, but like by 3 or 4 missiles, like on purpose. It wasn't like, oh, collateral damage. IRGC said we wanted this guy gone. And
he must have been a top Western agent. He was like a billionaire of some sort over there that was really all in with Israel and the West. And, he was into all kinds of things, making, funneling probably Syrian oil to Israel. And, he was probably responsible for organizing, the bombing that took place that killed 100 people in Iran. It was probably his network that was involved in that. So, I mean, that's all speculation. We'll never have the evidence, but if Iran chose to do that, they must have the evidence.
One other point, which is speculation, but I mean, come on, there's no other way. Since the strikes on Yemen, obviously all the air defense assets of the US in the region, that includes Syria, that includes Iraq, they had to be on high alert. They had to be, and yet everything got hit. And this is the PAC-3, the Patriots. That's their land defense system. I mean, the ships have Aegis, which is slightly different, or slightly more advanced. But this is Patriot, the one that got hammered in Kiev. Yeah. The world is paying attention to that. Like the Polish guys who were married to Kiev for about a year are the ones who broke this story, saying, hey, all this air defense we assembled in Kiev, it just got smashed. Misl Polska, Polish Thought magazine, ran a huge article about it. All this thing is coming out and people are paying attention. And that's why there's no, oh, here's our mighty aircraft carrier, so don't you dare do anything. Well, people dare do something now. And that's what's changed in 2024.
So Spaz is okay, Ian. He needed a little bit of comfort.
He needed a little bit of comfort when Maria got some food, so he's going crazy right now. Anytime there's food in the house, he assumes it's for him. Anytime a delivery man brings food into the house, he assumes, well, maybe this time it wasn't for all the previous time. It maybe this time it's for me. You know,
Hope springs eternal.
yes.
Happens every time here too.
But so Ben, that was obviously correct. So the aircraft carrier that is being moved out of the Red Sea because it would be vulnerable to. Did it move out of the Red Sea? Was that even correct? I know
One was
Gerald Ford, yes,
because they didn't want it within missile range of Yemen, and so again,
and the other ones.
We need to
the other one's in the East Med, so that's there to cover Israel.
Well, the Gerald Ford was on an extended deployment too, and that's the other. I mean, that's the thing. The U.S. Navy is stretched thin, so the air defense. So the threat to the carrier is real, but we also need to take into account that it was on an extended deployment to begin with. So it was going to be out there for a finite period of time, also. And I think the risk of escalation, like full-blown Iran-Israel war, was at its peak at the beginning of on October 7th and those few weeks afterwards. There's less risk now. I mean, there could still be escalation, but the window for escalation is closed somewhat since.
So that could be. I've heard other analysts suggest that Iran was happy when it was there because once it's there, that means there's not going to be any major strike against Iran, and that they would have to move it out before any kind of major strike against Iran took place because Iran could sink it quite easily. But it's quite possible that, they were just coming up against the end of its deployment, and they needed to do whatever it needs to do and took it back. But what about the Patriots? Like, the Patriots definitely have been proven to be, marginally effective, if that. And, I mean, that can't be good for, again, just the Western military prowess. Patriots are defeated in Kiev. Patriots are defeated in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's why they're not going to send the F-16, because that is the staple that leads to the F-35, right? If they see those pictures, they were terrified of the M1 Abrams burning on the fields of Kiev, and now the Patriot is basically burning. Some videos out, some, but basically it's defeated because they can strike any target at will now. The Russian aviation can. That's why they can't send basically their main staple into Kiev. They've delayed it for a year or something like that. That was the Dutch.
Well, look at what they did with the Abrams. They said they had this deal between Germany and the USA where Germany it was very clear at the time. They said, hey, we will send Leopards if you send Abrams. And the USA said, okay, sure. Germany sent their Leopards and the Abrams.
A dozen or something.
And the Abrams haven't materialized. So you have all these burning Leopards, but the Abrams is still untouched. It's just it was just a promise that so far has never materialized. And Germany is just in a weak position to never complain. I mean, they should have complained. How come? Because they do have ground. Germany does have grounds to complain. We agreed we would send Leopards if you had said Abrams. And there's really no excuse for there not to be Abrams. I mean, honestly, because Abrams is a Cold War weapon, we had this plan that if there was a large-scale conventional war between the Soviet Union and the USA, there would be thousands of Abrams tanks on the field in Europe. We have the infrastructure to support Abrams. There's no excuse to not have Abrams in Ukraine. They just don't want to see burning Abrams tanks, high-profile burning Abrams tanks in Ukraine, but they're fine with German weapons looking stupid.
Germany has been taken for a ride. That's why they're not sending the Taurus cruise missiles. They're basically linking it to the ATACMS. Send more of those, then maybe we'll send that. But basically, the larger point is all this undefeatable, super high-tech stuff that we have. Israel was famous, like the Merkava tank is undefeatable. We are the most high-tech army. Ukraine was supplied with the most high-tech NATO gear, and it turned out to be ineffective. That's the big turnaround, I think. In everybody's head for like maybe 10 years ago, it was, Jesus, this is serious business. We can't just defeat this. And that has been challenged in a big way.
Just in time for our next war with China. So
good luck. They also have hypersonics, by the way. Iran has them, Russia has them, China has them, and maybe there's one of the Hwasongs, which just means Mars. One of the North Korea has, I think, one model. So
before we pivot completely to China, you brought up Lloyd Austin. So there is some speculation. So Ian, do you know if we've seen a recent picture of Lloyd Austin? Does he have any burns or shrapnel wounds from like an explosion?
Well, so I know what you're getting at. So there is this rumor that Lloyd Austin was actually in Ukraine and he was injured or possibly even killed in a strike there. I've seen some pro-Russian sources even claiming that the prostate cancer is a cover story. Now, I don't think that's true. And the main reason I don't think that's true is because I think we have a Syria model in Ukraine. And by a Syria model is that there's a hotline, there's lines of communication between, whether anybody likes to admit it or not. And it goes against the propaganda of it being an existential battle between good and evil. But the reality is that Russia and the USA have lines of communication open. So if Putin or Biden or Antony Blinken or Lloyd Austin or whoever it is visits Syria or Ukraine, they tell the other side. They say, hey, our guy is going to be in this area for this period of time. Don't shoot any missiles in his direction while he's there.
I believe you have seen the same, and we have to state that these are rumors. These aren't Russian ministry reports or anything, but apparently the target was not high-ranking Ukraine officials, and like maybe he was collateral.
Because if you
Rishi Sunak, the Japanese foreign minister, and the new French foreign minister have just been in and out of Kiev at will. So you're completely right about that.
Because if he's lost it's one thing to lose a general or a colonel because they're soldiers. It comes with the territory that you might be killed in a military strike. But if you have an actual senior person like a minister or or God forbid, a state leader, it's an act of war to kill him. So there is a line of communication to make sure those people like Lloyd Austin or Joe Biden or Shoigu or Putin aren't accidentally killed.
Yeah, it's nice to speculate. It's nice to imagine that he might have been.
It's just prostate
What we know
cancer.
is we haven't seen him for 2 weeks of this year, since January the 1st. And apparently he's been let home from the hospital where he had some bad things, and he's working from home where he has secure lines. That's the official stuff we can tell you.
Yeah, prostate cancer. I don't think there's something worse than prostate cancer. So let's just.
But it sounds like he didn't handle that well. He didn't inform his chain of command allegedly, and he was receiving some criticism for not properly. He was AWOL, absent without leave, essentially, allegedly, which gives rise to the speculation that the stories, smells funny.
Well, it's just the Biden administration. Because like we said at the beginning of the show, Biden's a vegetable. He just didn't bother to tell him. And I don't think, and Lloyd Austin, let's be honest, is kind of a diversity hire. He's a Raytheon guy. Yeah. To begin with, I don't think Lloyd Austin is a terribly smart person. Biden's a vegetable. He didn't even notice that his Secretary of Defense was missing.
They're not decision makers. They're rubber stamp figureheads.
Yes.
No,
they just didn't notice. Yes.
I saw some Ukraine Telegram channels who are very grumpy. Like they feel like they're protecting NATO, and the NATO was supposed to protect them. They feel very betrayed, and they said if Lord Raytheon is removed, replace him with Ben Hodges, and we would win in 2 weeks. And I was like, Ben Hodges, who got everything wrong every step of the way. Yeah, that would hasten Russia's victory.
He's more Lord Raytheon than Lord Raytheon is. They're both total defense contractor.
Well, Ben Hodges is completely compromised, and not even just American circles. Just he's taking Polish money.
He's a European guy, like basically the European attack dog. Yeah. He runs operations here. And it's amazing that while he got everything wrong, it's as if nothing happened. He just continues to spew out the stuff.
Well, that's par for the course. That's standard operating procedure in the Western media.
Last I heard, Hodges was going to vacation in Crimea. He should be in vacation in Crimea.
That's true. What he said it.
He'll switch sides if Russia pays him enough, and then he'll be in Crimea. But what about the election in Taiwan? So that was some big news recently. Apparently, the bad guys won the election, but it was what you call a what is that called? A Pyrrhic victory, a Pyrrhic victory, because the opposition is at a coalition of the two other parties, and they don't think that even though they did win the election outright, the coalition against them is stronger than it was before the election. So that's kind of the positive spin on it. But yeah, the pro separatist, the U.S. lapdog puppets, that political party did win the election. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the U.S. is closer to, splitting up China and balkanizing it?
No.
I think the issue is that, I mean, I know a lot less about. I mean, I don't know really anything about China. But if you had a major conflict with Taiwan, it would be something similar to what you're seeing in Ukraine. You'd have Han's Chinese killing other Han's Chinese, and that's something I think even as annoyed as China might be, they're avoiding an open conflict with Taiwan. And as of right now, I think the situation with Taiwan will not change unless the USA reneges on the one China policy, because per the USA's own policy is that Taiwan, no matter what they say to CNN,
Yep.
per US, the US views Taiwan as part of China by its own admission. Unless that policy changes, I don't think you're going to see an open conflict with Taiwan.
For 50 years, since they had diplomatic relations, the one China principle has been legally abided by, even though they say ridiculous shit here and there. The Chinese side is not angry. The Western media said, the DPP, which is the very American party, won by very, very little. Fewer people showed up, basically. Won the presidency, but lost the legislature. So that's already like a weak government. The Chinese media was, we like this. This is great because it's not unified. It's a weakened Taiwan that doesn't have big, grandiose plans. While they are having, a sanctions war with them. Basically, we're cutting off this, we're cutting off that. Let's see how you like that, and we're slowly going to get you to the proper reunification principles. They didn't look worried to me at all, in Global Times or China Daily. They just don't. The West was like, yes, this will anger China. This will draw the ire of Xi Jinping. A lot of those headlines, it was all about anger, but I don't see it.
Are there forces and factions within the U.S. establishment that want to start a hot war with China?
I'm sure there are. Not that we know them, but the neocons come in different clubs, and I'm sure a lot of them want to focus on China. I mean, was it Obama's policy, the pivot to Asia? It's a threat because it's a threat of a good example. It shifted even during COVID. It grew by 5% this year. Shifted from the real estate, which they said everything is going to collapse. No, they just killed some, fuck you price gouging real estate, and went all into industry. Everything is up. It just became the largest auto exporter. The Economist, like 10 years apart, ran a headline, "The dirtiest place on earth," with a smoking dragon. And this was the EV invasion of the world. And they were coming in, these electric vehicles like asteroids to kill the dinosaurs. Like, they are terrified that they can't stop this rise. And they are, again, impotently terrified. That's what I think it looks like, no matter what they try.
I think the goal is to subordinate China as opposed to have an open conflict with them. That's my opinion on it. Because if you look at it like from a Darwinian perspective, like every species if humans are like animals, every animal has a niche in their ecosystem. So if you say different nations of people are like different animals in an ecosystem, you have Americans and Russians in the same niche, right? You have the USA, which is the great white man. Then you have Russians who are another white man, and they see him as a direct competitor in the same niche. But China is the Asian man, and so from the eyes of Washington, from these oligarchs, it's a different niche. You're like, okay, we don't have to destroy China. We can subordinate them. We can negotiate them into a lower peg on the evolutionary hierarchy.
You hit the nail on the head there. There was a Freudian slip, not from Biden this time, but Karine Jean-Pierre, the spokesperson, who said Biden would very happily sit down with Yeltsin to negotiate about Ukraine, who's been dead something like 10 years now. They want Yeltsin's Russia. That's white. This Russia, it's barbaric Asians. They want Deng Xiaoping's China, because then all the money could come in and there were huge profits to be made. Unfortunately, under Xi Jinping, all the corruption and basically profiteering for individuals, including foreign companies, went away and came under the control of the government. That's not a China they like. That's an assertive China who's building the Belt and Road Initiative with US dollars. Shit. Our infinite money is being sent on real stuff. It's a terrible position that they found themselves in, and now Iran is firmly in this triad, the new axis of evil. That's the nightmare I think a lot of people in the Washington circles of power find themselves.
So Iran did sign some kind of a defense agreement with Russia recently.
I don't recall defense agreements, but all their transactions are basically now void of SWIFT. They can't be tracked, they can't be sanctioned, and that's exactly what BRICS offers the world: immunity to sanctions, immunity to interference. Whatever you want to trade with, you can trade with. You're not going to be destroyed because your leader said something. That's
before we get too far off the topic of Taiwan. My question is, so China said straight up, if Taiwan declares their independence, if they push for independence, there's going to be a war.
That's a war.
My question is, what is keeping the U.S. from changing their policy, from changing the one China policy, from changing their policy from saying Taiwan is part of China, officially declaring Taiwan is their own country, and then getting their lapdog in Taiwan to go along with that? Because that's war with China. And if the West wants war with China, if some factions want war with China, so is there like an internal struggle in the ruling establishment to, for policies? And is there like a warmongering Uber hawk faction wanting to get these policies changed and to get a war going with China? And then who's holding them back? And how long, how is that battle going? It's all speculation, but
speculation. Then Ian, go first. Good.
I would say it's a thrown knife leaves the hand empty, because while Taiwan is there and it's part of the one China policy, it's a threat that the USA can hang over China's heads. But if they go ahead and recognize Taiwan's independence, and that's a war. And also, it's not a threat they can deploy anymore. And the perfect example is the Russian sanctions from hell. They could constantly threaten Russia: if you mess around, we are going to kick you out of SWIFT. But once they were actually kicked out of SWIFT, and froze their foreign assets, at this point, what can Russia be threatened with besides open warfare? Well, basically nothing. So that's why it can be better to have that sword hanging over someone's heads, where China feels somewhat compelled to play along with the USA, however crazy it is, while that threat hasn't been fulfilled. So I don't think that's necessarily a sign of an internal conflict.
Okay, no, that's great. And then they might not really want a war with China. They want to pretend that this threat is constantly ever present. And I think that threat number one, as you said, that threat would disappear if they actually, started a war. Then you wouldn't have the threat. But also the threat's disappearing in Ukraine, and the impotence in Ukraine, the impotence in the Red Sea. That threat is becoming less and less viable. So it sounds like you don't see any realistic, strategy to engage China in an actual war using Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, as the Philippines, especially as proxy.
Oh, the Philippines is the main one now, yeah.
Well, I think, just comparing what happened with Russia and Ukraine, I think a lot of that was unplanned. We were making this threat over and over. We were not expecting Russia to call us on it. But on the reverse side, Russia was very surprised when the sanctions actually happened. And they were actually scared of the sanctions right at the beginning. And I think that's what motivated that honestly very generous ceasefire agreement with Ukraine, because
they opened champagne.
Sanctions did bite. Those sanctions did bite. At this point, it's dishonest to say the sanctions did not bite, and the Russians were spooked by it when they first happened. But now that threat is past. And yes, I think from China's perspective, they're looking at, well, you know what, that probably applies to us as well. But at the same time, I don't think China is going to deliberately step on the USA's toes to an extent that they get an equivalent of that. But at this point, I don't see any compelling reason to think the USA is going to try to force a war with China, because it's just, I don't see that in the cards right now. And as long as one China policy is in effect, there's not going to be a war. I think is a fairly safe statement to make.
On that point, I'm sure you know the guy called Andrei Martyanov, at least by reputation, a Russian, like basically a Soviet naval, basically an engineer, very, very cool guy. And he's always going on about the leaders, especially in the Pentagon, like having humanities and law degrees and stupid incompetence. But there has to be, he always says this, a couple of sane people who can actually, assess the battlefields. And there's more defensive missiles on that shore off China, where there's, next to Taiwan, than there is anywhere else in the world. And I think the Pentagon could be, some people in the Pentagon could be say, don't do this. This is going to be an absolute catastrophe for us. I mean, they've run these games, war games, one after the other. They couldn't achieve a victory on the board. So maybe that's where some sanity comes from. I'm sure that the Boltons and Lindsey Grahams would like to go in and bomb everything, still believing that they come out unscathed or unscarred. But there must be some cooler heads.
I'm sure, and I've said this before too, I'm sure the cooler heads, or not even the cooler heads, just the practical heads who look at the board from a military perspective is in the Pentagon, and the hotheads who just are thinking out of emotions rather than practicality are on the civilian side, are on the State Department and the White House. And then meanwhile, the Pentagon, the other faction, is pushing back, saying, no, it's just not, in practical terms, it's not a good idea to start a war with either Russia or China.
Yeah, times have changed. It's not the 1940s or 90s again.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yemen firing $5,000 to $10,000 little dronies, and you need a $2 million missile to shoot it down. That's not sustainable. Mm. And then you have to go to a friendly port to restock. It's just not sustainable.
Yeah, well, they had the Saudi Arabian proxy, with all kinds of capability right there in the region, unable to defeat Yemen. And so if that wasn't a viable military option, for sure, there's no viable U.S. military option other than a Desert Storm kind of invasion where you have hundreds of thousands of troops occupying Yemen. So guys, we've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes. We've touched on most things. We were gone all last week. Next week, my schedule is not looking good either, but we should have a second program later in this week. Any final thoughts before we close?
I mean, it's just been 2 weeks into this new year, and I'm amazed at the amount of stuff that's happening, amount of board pieces moving, and I can't wait to see what comes next, basically.
You have another 50 weeks to go, so.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, we will reconvene probably later on this week. Thank you very much, and we'll see you then.